Hey, what's going on? So, just finished up at the gym and enjoying the weather outside. Thought I'd shoot the video outside today as opposed to in the office. Hopefully, you can hear me with the wind and all that good stuff. But today, I want to talk about one of the cornerstones of what I work with people on, and that is getting clarity, right? And this is one of those things that people um, they they talk about a lot, and they think that they have a good idea of, but in 20 years of doing personal training and doing business coaching and working with individuals on habit forming, stuff like that, um, most people don't have a good sense of clarity about where they are now, what they want to go after, and then how they're going to get there, right? The world is full of plans. The world is full of frameworks and recipes and methods and, this 6 week thing and this 12-week thing, and hey, I've got programs too, but the world is full of these canned plans, and people love to get them. They love to buy this plan because they see somebody who's achieved success, and they see somebody that's achieved some sort of thing that they think that they want, and they're like, well, I want to be like that person, so I need to do what they say to do, and at face value, that makes sense. Modeling is a valuable technique. But the problem with it is that people don't get a lot of clarity on both what they actually want and where they are now. And that derails plans that even might be very good. The plan might be accurate, but if they don't get clarity on those two things, they're going to struggle. And here's what I mean. So let's say you see somebody who looks awesome in a bathing suit, right? Or they've made $1 million or something like that. And you say, okay, well, I want to buy their plan to do that thing. And they faithfully produce that plan, that they faithfully produce what they did to get there. Okay. Well, are you where they started from? And this is the first thing that I have to work with people on is, where are you right now? Okay. Like maybe you got to lose 50 pounds. Maybe you are starting from broke. Maybe you have $100,000 in the bank that you can spend. Whatever it may be, is your starting place the same place that theirs is, right? So, and if it's not close, if it's not similar, then what makes you think that that plan is going to work? So when I start working with people, we got to figure out where are you physically. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. We just need to know the information. There's no judgment on it. When I start working with people, quite frankly, I usually couldn't care less where they're coming from. But where are they physically? What's your energy like? What's your fitness like? What are your habits around fitness? What are your habits around nutrition? Okay, and then when it comes to where are you as far as work goes, as far as skills go, as far as assets go, same thing. Do you have money in the bank? Do you have a job? Do you have a skill set? Because if you want to do a certain thing and you don't have a skill set, then you're limited by skills and maybe resources. But if you want to do that thing and you have a skill set around that and you just need the resources, that's a different problem, right? So those are different starting points. Where are you as far as your relationships? Where are you as far as your, lifestyle habits? I worked with a guy once who had pretty severe drinking problem. Everything else was going for him, but he couldn't tie it all together because, he had that situation going on. So it really didn't matter what plan we put him on because he couldn't end up following through with it, right? So get very clear on where you are. Again, no judgment, but get very clear on where you are. Next, let's get clear on where you actually want to go. And this is a little bit different than what people think, because everybody says, oh, I know where I want to be. I know where I want to go. Maybe. But a lot of people really don't. They don't have a good idea of it. They see something they like. They see, again, the millionaire lifestyle. They see the guy who has six-pack abs. They see, so-and-so clubbing it up, right? And that looks attractive, it looks exciting, it looks fun. Okay, cool. But is that what you actually want? Because you could follow a plan perfectly and you could end up there. And then when you get there, not that happy. So we kind of dig down and we dig into what it is that you want to actually accomplish. When we set up, Nick Peterson calls them bumpers, but we set up kind of guardrails on, you know, absolutes, standards, like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I don't miss one of my kids' baseball games. Okay, well, if that's one of your hard and fast standards, then there's going to be times where you probably end up turning down business opportunities because you're going to have to miss a baseball game, right? Or I don't want to, I have a client who he's lost, I think, 80 pounds at last check. And he kind of knows in his head that there's a certain place he doesn't want to get over again, So that for him is a guideline. He knows that whatever he wants to do in life, whatever he's going to do, there's going to be certain health guidelines that he's going to have to maintain. So that will end up dictating some of his decisions. And unless you really kind of think through that and you figure out what it is you want to do, then you're going to always struggle, because you may end up achieving what you think is your goal, but you end up not getting what you actually want. And then you're left depressed and you're left stuck wondering, like, what do I do from here? And this is the people that get kind of caught up on that rat race of chasing goals all the time. They keep achieving them and still end up being unhappy. Not to say you shouldn't keep continuing to attack goals, but there's a difference between feeling compelled to and a difference between chasing things you're actually looking for. So those are going to be the two endpoints that you need to figure out if you want to achieve clarity. So next, you want to achieve clarity on your process, right? And how you're going to get there. And when you have your two endpoints, if you're a long process, like let's say, in 10 years I want to be a multimillionaire, something like that, that's cool. But your brain has a kind of a hard time really nailing down what that means. Your brain doesn't conceptualize things like numbers really well, and it also doesn't conceptualize long time periods really well. Because your brain is wired to focus on you surviving. So your brain kind of doesn't care what happens to you 10 years from now. Especially if there's a chance that what happens next week is going to be more important, right? So it's like in the fitness world, for example, like we'll have people that can survive with an injury and keep pounding away on it and wear their knee out and end up with needing a knee replacement because they've had crappy squat technique for the past 10 years, right? Well, why does the brain allow them to have crappy squat technique for 10 years? Well, basically because the brain's not worried about 10 years from now. It's worried about standing up with that bar on its back at any given moment. So the brain will compensate poor technique to get the job accomplished versus long-term survival. It'll bias against that. So when it comes to kind of selecting your path and selecting how you're going to go about achieving your goal, I view long-term targets and long-term goals like that as, again, long-term, and they're kind of like end zones to settle for, right? Things to move in that direction. But really, like, nailing them down real hard is kind of a defeatist thing to do, because it's always going to end up changing. I'm 42 years old, and I assure you that my 42-year-old goals are different than when I was 32. What I thought I wanted 10 years ago when I was 32 is very different from what I want now, and especially different than when I was 22. So long-term goals are nice things to shoot for, but they're not really going to be your pinpoint things to do. Instead, target something shorter. Work in kind of 3-month or 6-week or whatever works for you, but I find that for most people 3 months is about as long as they can go. Work in blocks and kind of pick some sort of intermediate goal that gets you moving in that direction, that you can really you can nail down a little bit tighter. You can say, okay, well, I want to achieve XYZ that's pretty specific in the next 3 months or 6 weeks, or again, whatever your time period that works for you is, and go hard at that. And then from there, once you get it, then you can evaluate and you can say, okay, well, did that move me closer or further from my big targets? And if it moved you closer, great. If it moved you further, you got to course correct. And that's much easier to do on a 3-month window or a 6-week window or whatever window than it is in the long term. So pick your shorter targets. They're going to be your priorities, and view them as like a sprint. View them as like you're going to go hard for this, and then you're going to kind of back off, you're going to evaluate, and then maybe you're going to pick another one. Use that kind of stepping stone style approach, and I think you're going to be a lot more successful in achieving clarity towards what you're going for, because it's going to be much easier to see. I believe it was John Maxwell, the leadership coach, leadership author, and he uses a headlight analogy. Like if it's dark and you're driving home and your house is 50 miles away, you can't see your house from wherever you are now. You may have a map to get there, you may know how to get there, but you can't see it. So you don't know what's in the road. You don't know if there's construction. You don't know if there's, it's Maine. I live in Maine, so there's deer crossing or moose crossing the road. You don't know that. You don't know if there's been an accident ahead of you, something like that. So even though you know how to get wherever you want to go, you kind of just have to take it on faith that you're heading in that direction. But what you can see is what's ahead of you in the headlights. Maybe that's 300 feet, maybe that's 500 feet. If it's those Xeon LEDs, it's like 2 miles or some stuff. But you can see what's ahead of you in the headlights. And so all you can really do is target and react to what's ahead of you in the headlights. If you try to go more than that, you're going to struggle. And if you try to put the cart before the horse and focus on what's happening right outside your driveway when you're 50 miles away, you're going to struggle. It's not going to be effective. So instead, focus on those headlights. The other thing I like to work with people on, and this is another good Nick Peterson thing, is understanding the difference between the acceptable case or the good case and the best case. So let's say you have a longer term problem or longer term thing you want to do, and you're like, okay, well, I want to be a multimillionaire, and I want to be, what is the less but most acceptable time frame you could do that, or longest most acceptable time frame you could do that. Okay, well, I'll give myself 10 years to do that, and if you did that, you'd be happy. Now, you'd be happier if you did it in 2 years. Like, let's say that was your best case, 2 years. But you would be okay if you did it in 10. Okay. Well, what do we need to do it in 10? Because chances are 10 is going to be a lot easier than 2. So let's get 10 squared away and figure out what is the minimum work and energy you can do to create that 10-year goal. I'm not saying that's all you're going to do, but I'm saying what is the baseline? What is the minimum? And get that squared away. If you can get that figured out, and you can do everything you can do to lock that in place, to lock that minimum in place and get that so where that happens and you've got as little energy as possible invested in making that happen, now that you've basically locked in success. Okay? That whatever you've done, you've set up something to get yourself successful. Now that you've done that, then you can start playing around with things to get you towards your best case, which is the 2 years or faster. But until you get that squared away, you're always going to end up people tend to shoot for their best case no matter what, and that tends to involve the most risk, and they tend to get themselves in trouble. So instead, minimize the risk, get it locked in place, then work on, as Nick says, collapsing time. So when it comes to clarity, just a quick recap. It's not just like, oh, I want to do XYZ, I want to make $1 million, or I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to do whatever. All those things are good. But start with figuring out where you are now. Figure out where you are on the map. Because, let's say I wrote you a perfect map to get you from New York City to Los Angeles. And if I give it to you, but you're in Topeka, Kansas, you're probably going to struggle, right? So perfectly good plan, but if you don't know where you're starting from, it's going to be awfully hard to make it the right one. Then from there, figure out what it is you actually want to accomplish and really figure it out. Figure out both a long-term goal, you can be a little looser with that, but figure out a tighter short-term goal. And I recommend operating in shorter-term sprints. With most of my clients, we use 90 days, 3 months, 12 weeks, something, whatever works out best for your schedule there. I like a 12-week period, but maybe it's 6, maybe it's 8, whatever works best for you. Really nail that down more concretely, because that's going to allow you to course correct more frequently. And then from there, figure out what it is that's going to be the least energy output you could put into making that happen. Even if it takes the longest, what's the least you could do that would be acceptable? Get that nailed down. Once you get that squared away and you actually get that in motion, then you can worry about speeding things up. Then you can add extra if you have the bandwidth to do it. But if you lock it in place so it's going to happen just the way it is, then you're going to win no matter what. And the more wins you can stack up, the more successful you're going to be. So with that in mind, that's Achieving Clarity. Go ahead and give me a subscribe. Go ahead and give me a like if this was helpful for you. But work through that framework and work through those steps. And we'll see you next time.